All right, welcome back to the Stoic George podcast. This is episode 16. This is a solo podcast where I just talk, open the channel. I talk a lot about my spiritual and self-growth journey. And this might be a little bit of a weird episode because I have been quarantining for a few days now. I've got the COVIDs. It's been interesting. You know, it always gets a little psychologically weird when you are isolated for this long, and I'm definitely going a little bit stir crazy. Tomorrow is going to be my last full day of quarantine. I'm getting like giddy about the idea of socializing again, but it's been an interesting time, and every time I'm kind of in isolation, I mean, it happened during the big quarantine of 2020. I feel like my personal spiritual progress always like kind of skyrockets. Like it moves a lot quicker when I'm in isolation. I think that's kind of just how it works for me. Also, I wanted to show you guys, I've been, you may know that one of my, like inner child joy type hobbies, creative things I've been doing, is playing the guitar, and I'm a complete beginner, but I just figured out how to switch to the B minor chord because I've been trying to play, Fade Into You by Mazzy Star, and I'm going to give it a go right here, see if I could show you. Pressure's on, so I might not get this right. Let's see. So that was pretty good actually for me. That chord shape of the B minor, it's insane. Like I was trying to learn it for, like, first of all, I couldn't even press down on it because it was a bar chord. Like I physically couldn't get it to sound correct with my fingers. That came together in like 2 weeks of practicing, and then I was trying to switch to it fast enough to play it in a song or just a chord progression for like what feels like a month, and it was just not happening. I would try to switch to it. It was too slow, and I kind of felt the sensation of like, maybe I'm not going to learn this one. Like maybe this is my cap. Maybe like I'm not going to be able to switch to this chord fast enough. But then one day, happened to be stoned on marijuana. Suddenly I was playing, and all of a sudden just boom, switched to that B minor chord. And it was like that first time that I switched to it and it just worked out. It's like I didn't even have to try. It just happened automatically. And this is something really cool that I find parallel with my skateboarding journey and my guitar journey, is that the learning process is really similar and magical. It's like when you're learning a new skateboard trick or when you're learning something new on the guitar, and I'm sure this is widely applicable to learning any skill with the physical body. It's like you repeat it a certain amount of times, and then all of a sudden some automatic process will take over and do it for you. It's like, I think about this, I don't know how many skaters are listening, but I think about this one trick in skateboarding called the backside tail slide. That's like a fairly, like a lot of people can do this trick. It's like not a crazy one, but it just would never work for my body. And I literally was trying it for like 7 to 8 years, and then all of a sudden one day my body could just do it. And it's really interesting how, and this does connect to the spiritual shit too, because it's like, I used to think everything required like my personal effort in order to make it happen. Like I felt like it was me, like I was doing everything. And so I thought like it was all up to me to learn every skate trick, and I have to control every portion of my movement in order to make it happen. But in actuality, it's like you practice and then some automatic thing takes over. And lately when I've been skating, it's like I'll have this sensation of like I'm not actually doing anything. It's like kind of just happening. Like, it's like when you get on a bicycle, it's like you're not really thinking about every little thing. And same with when you're walking and operating in the city. Like, it is pretty magical how our autopilot system, I guess, can work. And I think this connects to the idea of spontaneous action and living purely in the moment. It's like once your body knows how to do something, you can like, it can just happen spontaneously in the moment, almost without you even doing anything, which is just really interesting and speaks to one of the magical things about the human experience and our ability to learn things with our body. Just kind of something that's very cool and something that I appreciate. And yeah, somehow connects to this idea that like when you are in the present moment, like you have powers, it's like we think that we're doing so much to make all this stuff happen. Like I even think about this when I'm recording this podcast, and I've mentioned this before. It's like, am I really like thoughtfully planning out every word that's coming out? Or I feel like no, the answer is no. What's happening is that at some point maybe I'm preparing a little bit, but then I at some point need to let go, press record, and just allow this spontaneous action to just happen. That's creative. That's the creative response to the present moment. That's how it works. It's kind of effortless, it's a crazy thing to wrap your mind around. So yeah, I've been in quarantine, learning the guitar, kind of quarantine activities. At the beginning, I always think, and this happened in 2022, at the start of a quarantine, I always think it's like cozy and fun. And I'm like, oh, excited for like the opportunity to relax. What's crazy about this Western society we live in is like, for me at least, it's like damn near impossible to have guilt-free relaxation unless I'm physically ill. So it was nice to like have COVID, like I have an excuse to not do anything. And that did allow me to like really sink in. I like got my picnic blanket on the center of my room. I'm kind of having like this solo slumber party, watching a lot of movies. And yeah, it's cool. It's like and it's interesting. It's like, right, I've like let go. I'm giving up, capital G, capital U. I'm giving up during this quarantine, just letting myself rest and do what I need to do. And what's interesting about that level of letting go and just allowing your body to do what it needs to do is you will do what it needs to do. And I've been like, sleeping a lot and reading a lot and not forcing myself to do anything, but sometimes I'll end up at the computer working. And yeah, even to record this podcast, I like wasn't really sure. I didn't have a time in mind. I wasn't forcing myself to do it. But again, here I am, and this moment has spontaneously arisen. I do have a crazy, maybe I should just get into it now. You guys are going to think I'm crazy for this one. And again, I like to catch myself when I project judgment of myself onto others. Like when I assume people are going to judge me for something, I've suddenly become aware that that's myself being insecure, and I'm putting that onto other people. But that's all coming from me, and judgment or not from other people is irrelevant. The fact that I'm assuming people are going to judge me stems from an insecurity within. Really interesting. Something I've been projecting judgment onto others for my whole life. So that's one that I'm continuing to work through, but the awareness is arising more, which is good. So I don't even know. This is really crazy what I'm about to tell you guys. So it was 2 nights ago. I'm like, did this really? Am I really about to say this? A couple nights ago, the full moon popped up over the horizon. I was spending some time on the roof. That's kind of become part of my quarantine routine, which it also was during 2020 for like that whole extended quarantine. And now it's a part of my mini quarantine. I've been popping up to the roof around sunset time every evening just to catch the sunset. I've been reading a bit. I just started this book called Zen Buddhism. It's a collection of writing by D.T. Suzuki, edited by William Barrett. It is blowing my mind. I'm getting, deeper into Buddhism and spirituality. I finished this book that I mentioned in the last episode called Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. Words can't even, I keep wanting to try to capture the essence of what this book did for me into words, and I just can't, but I will say it resonated with me intensely, on my spiritual journey. It gave me a lot of validation for the things I've been going through, especially because what I feel like I'm sort of in the process of doing is unlearning my Western upbringing and way of thinking. So it's there can be a lot of doubt in that process, but hearing that what's going on in my mind is a thing that spiritual leaders, I guess, have thought and written about, and to have them put my experience into words so concisely is very validating, and it harbors my doubts about, moving away from Western thinking, and I think therefore moves me closer to freedom, enlightenment, whatever. And I always catch myself when I say that I'm becoming enlightened or awakened. I always cringe a little bit. I think this is the same thing of projecting self-consciousness. It's who else is going to decide but me what kind of process I'm going through? And I think that is what I'm going through. Maybe in 5 years, I'll realize that in this moment, as I'm saying this, I was actually totally ignorant. But where was I? Oh, yeah. I was going up to the roof every night for sunset. Sunsetting earlier now. It's beautiful, beautiful fall weather, and I'm mostly stuck inside, but it's great to have the roof. And so I went up the other day just to watch the sunset, and then it was a full moon, full October moon. I believe they call it the hunter's moon, and I noticed it pop up over the horizon. Actually, I think someone texted me to look at it. I didn't even realize it was a full moon or anything. And you know how a full moon, once it pops over the horizon, is absolutely massive. I mean, it's one of my favorite sensations ever, is seeing how big the full moon looks right on the horizon. It's one of the most incredible things ever. I've always been really drawn and interested by the moon. Anyways, moon was looking great. I appreciated it as always, tried to take photos and videos with my phone that of course did no justice to it. Thought about running down to grab the zoom lens for my camera that I'm using now to record this video episode, but just ended up appreciating it, kind of reading more. And then, okay, here's where the crazy part begins. Without really even thinking about it, I decided to sit down and meditate. And there's a kind of meditation that I've never really tried, but I think it came up maybe in the Zen Buddhism book. Maybe that's why it was on my mind, or maybe I've just read it in the past, but it's this form of meditation where you fixate on an object. And I was like, hey, why not do that with the moon? So I sat down in lotus right up there on the roof, and I just stared at the moon. And my mind in that moment was really primed to, let go of all the labels and all the concepts. There's this Buddhist idea that, like, in our normal state of consciousness, when we look at something, like, instantaneously we apply like thousands of preconceptions and concepts about what that thing is, and this prevents us from seeing the object or the thing as it truly is. For example, when you look at a tree, you're not really seeing exactly what that tree is. What you're seeing is a tree, a concept that you have in your head. And this is something I was just reading in the Suzuki book, right? And so I tried to really, really look at the moon. I tried to relax my notions of what the moon is that, have been building up since learning about the moon in school, learning that it's this thing revolving around the earth. I tried to just drop all of it and just focus on the object, drop everything, and just see it for what it was. And the first psychedelic sensation that happened was I started meditating on the space between myself and the moon, right? And at first it gave me this image of, like, me sitting there on the planet and then this vast distance between myself and the moon. And then something happened where I asked myself, like, who is noticing this space, or this space is from the moon to who? Right? I was kind of thinking of myself as the awareness, and then suddenly something happened where that space just collapsed. Like, it was like, I don't know how else to describe it. The space between myself and the thing I was looking at collapsed. And after that, and I'm just going to leave it at that because I don't know, it doesn't feel sufficient, but I don't know what other words to use. After that, the moon looked different than I had ever seen it before. I think usually when I look at the moon, I see the moon, the variation in color doesn't really, it's just like, I almost like create this image of this sphere, and I can almost like see the sphere of the moon when I'm looking at it. But in this moment, and I was fixating on it visually really intensely, it looked like, have you ever seen those videos where, like, there's like glue in a circular petri dish and you like put on a color dye and it like spreads out all funky? That's kind of what I saw in the surface of the moon. It was like this white marble with like colors like sprawling out, and it was very beautiful. And I had never seen the moon this way. Like, I wasn't seeing it as this idea of this thing that's revolving around the earth. It was just this sensation of light and color. And I was struck by how I had never seen it like this before. And I started to notice the glow around the moon radiating. And I started to get like giddy inside, like this sensation of joy and giddiness rose within me because I was like having a new experience. It was like, I think back to when I saw a total solar eclipse in 2016, I believe, or 2017. And I remember once the eclipse reached totality, I had this visceral reaction, and I started hyperventilating and crying because it was such an intense solar cosmic experience. And I can almost compare it to that, which is funny because the moon is up there every day, but I had never I think what I realized is I had never really looked at it. And it's like, I think what I experienced, and the Zen Buddhism book really primed me for this, is I experienced the truth of the fact that when we look at things, we don't truly see them, because our concepts, they really do get in the way. And the thing is, and this is something I've felt on psychedelics, I've always felt on psychedelics that psychedelics show me the whole truth, which is great and beautiful. But I also understand why we can't always see the whole truth, because the whole truth is way too beautiful. It's way too beautiful. It's way too intense. So it's like, you get the glimpses on psychedelics and in moments like this where I was looking at the moon, but it's like, it's tough to operate, right, in that mode of seeing things as they are, because it's so dazzling. And I actually don't know if I fully believe what I just said. I feel like I would like to try to always see things as they are and always see that true raw. I mean, that's the goal of Zen, is to see life as it is. I don't think it's impossible to operate in that way. I think it is possible. But let me continue with the moon experience. So these things were happening. It was already very, very intense. And then, okay, then as I was focusing on the moon, the vision of the city in my peripherals started becoming, first of all, it started fading to black a little bit. And then it started becoming cartoon-like and like really psychedelic. Like, I was seeing the moon, and I was just staring at it. And then in the periphery, the city down here started fading, yet also pulsating with cartoonish outlines. And I was literally sitting there in Lotus having a completely sober psychedelic experience. And I was so overwhelmed in the best way possible. And at some point I stood up and felt like it was time to go. And it didn't even faze me that much. It's like I'm not even surprised, because I feel like I'm starting to understand things and see things. And so I'm like, oh yeah, of course I've never seen the moon. And of course, when I saw the moon for the first time, I had a profound psychedelic-like experience. So like, it didn't even surprise me. And I've long heard stories of like people reaching psychedelic states through meditation, and I definitely never thought that would happen to me, because I've been meditating for a long time. I did I want to say probably over a year of near daily meditation for 10 minutes. And then, as I may have described in a prior episode at some point, I stopped doing the daily meditation because I started to slip into meditative moments. Like, they started to punctuate my daily life. Like, for example, I would be sitting there having an experience, say at a party or relaxing in a park. I would get these flash moments of like meditation where I would suddenly be really, really present. And so I stopped feeling the need to do the sit down meditations, because it was like the thing was happening to me, and it was happening to me in my real life. And I feel like that's meditation is not separate from real life. It is real life. So, but anyways, where was I going with this? Oh yeah. Never did I think I would induce one of those psychedelic states, through meditation. And, you hear it a lot that it happens when people do breath work, which is something I've never even tried. I have a lot to experience and learn, my friends. But yeah, now I get it. I get it. That experience with the moon did something very profound for me. I'm not like attached to it by any means, but I'm like, whoa, shit. Like, I just fucking, like, that just happened. Like, for real. Like, completely sober. I just had a psychedelic experience by looking at the fucking moon. What the fuck? You know? But I'm also not surprised. It's like, it makes perfect sense. And yeah, now that it never appealed to me, that form of Buddhist meditation where you're fixating on an object. It never appealed to me, but now I get it. And there's something, I'm looking at this tree right now. There's something about the space between what I perceive as I and the object. This is the duality we're trying to get rid of, right? And I think when that space collapsed for me, it was like I became one with the universe. I actually want to read some text if I can, because I was sharing this experience, and sometimes when I'm recording, I'm like, did I articulate it as well as I articulated it then? Because I'm always trying to articulate and process my experience constantly. Let me scroll up and read how I described it to someone else. Here it goes. As I stared at the moon, I tried to release all my concepts about what the moon is, and eventually it started to look completely different than I had ever seen it before. Like, it didn't look like a moon. It just looked like this abstract glowing disk of varying shades, and I started to really notice the glow around it. As I got deeper into this, I started to get tunnel vision on the moon, and the view of the city in my peripherals was both fading to black and also becoming cartoon-like. I was also having these flashes of perceiving the distance between myself and the moon out in space, but suddenly I would wonder who is perceiving the space, and then the space would collapse, and it was all just one experience. I can honestly compare it to being on LSD or mushrooms. It lasted about 10 minutes, and then when I averted my eyes, it was instantly back to normal. That's how I described it, closer to the experience, to someone else. And then they actually sent a message saying, what you described sounded like you were merging with the whole universe. And I was like, yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. Earnestly, I do. And I think the thing is, how I understand it now is we are always one with the universe. The separation is false. It's not us in the universe. It's that we are a part of the whole. And so what I experienced was a flash of the truth that sometimes I don't always see. And I had this other thought, right? It's like this idea that the truth is like too grand to always be perceiving. I, for the first time recently, found an appreciation for the ego, because I think that my ego kind of became my enemy along my spiritual path. I was like, my ego is making me suffer. Like, I need to stomp this out and get rid of it. But now I'm like, oh, like the ego organizes our world for us in a very practical way. Like, as I'm looking around, it's like, my room, the tree, the street, it's all so organized. And obviously that's not the whole truth of it all, but it's like very efficient. So I found an appreciation for what my ego does and how it narrows the world. And it's like, now that I'm kind of having more moments where I'm seeing it all, it's like I am finding an appreciation for the narrowing tool that is the ego that creates a very manageable existence. And it's like, since now I'm not totally grasping the ego and totally, it's like, right, for most of my life, I was completely absorbed in the ego world. Like, I was ignorant to the wider thing. I was in society playing by its rules. I thought that was the way it was. I was in the ego world. I didn't see the whole thing. Now that I see the whole thing, kind of, it's like, oh, maybe I can let a little ego back in, appreciate it as a tool. Either Ram Dass said, or he quoted someone saying that ego is a great servant, but a lousy master. And I'm starting to understand that. And I think I wrote something about that in, here it is. I realized that my ego is really quite the mechanism. It's quite remarkable. The filtering mechanisms I have that give me my small little focused world. How efficient, how useful, how lovely. So maybe I'm becoming friends with the ego again, and this kind of relates to a lot of the things I've been going through that I've heard other spiritual thinkers go through as well. It's this like, I was long in a period where I felt like I wanted to reject the physical plane, the ego world. I really wanted to pull away from skateboarding, to pull away from YouTube and social media. I wanted to reject the ego. I wanted to be in those higher planes. But now I'm like, now what I'm seeing is that they're two sides of the same coin. It's like, there's room for this world in front of me, and I need my ego to operate in it. This feels like a good place. But again, I don't want to, shout out cutting through spiritual materialism. I don't want to put myself in another box where I'm like, okay, yeah, because of all this work and this thinking and these experiences, now I'm in a good place and I need to stay here. Trying to not attach in that way, but like, yes, appreciating this journey that I've been through. And I think it's like, yeah, here's another thought. I don't know if I've well articulated. It's like, with this temptation to withdraw, it's like, and I think that was important. It's like, I needed space from all these ego things that I was so attached to. Like, I needed some distance in order for me to see the greater perspective of it all. I think that space paid off, and now I can re-enter with a healthier relationship with the ego things, with the worldly things. And it's like, yeah, I have been kind of accepting my karma. Like, I've been accepting the life that I'm in, and I've been accepting, I used to go through this whole crisis with social media every day about how long is this going to last as a career? What am I doing? What does this mean? And now I'm just like kind of surrendering. I'm like, I'm here. For some reason, I've ended up doing this social media, creating stuff for work. It's like, maybe that's my karma, and maybe I can just do it gracefully, and maybe it's all okay, Maybe I don't need to stress and think so hard, and maybe this is what I'm meant to be doing. Maybe this is my karma, and why fight it? Why fight it? And I can be, I don't have to reject the life that's in front of me in order to take the spiritual path. I can take the spiritual path through everything that I do in this life. I think I even wrote something down like this morning. I feel like I wrote it in my morning pages, actually. Something about sitting on the computer. Hang on, let me find this. I think it's worth it. Even the mundane computer tasks, they end up in front of me, don't they? Computer tasks are spiritual. Computer tasks are as spiritual as Zen as anything else. That's what I wrote about that. And Ram Dass calls this karma yoga. Karma yoga is using your everyday life, your everyday tasks, accepting that and doing those things spiritually, being present with them and not trying to add all these mental layers of should I be doing this and that, and just surrendering to your experience, surrendering to your karmic path. And a misconception, something that's jumping out in my head is like, oh, like, what if I don't like this job? And it's like, okay, yeah, like thinking about changing jobs could be a part of your karmic path too. And you can do that mindfully and gracefully. It's like you can embrace your whole life, including the paradoxes and the chaos and the overthinking. You can accept it all and do it all here and now. What else do I want to say? Oh yeah, I'm supposed to try to make myself some money. So I have this idea, right? I have this essential reading list on Amazon. I'm keeping track of like all the books that I'm reading and the most important ones that I believe have guided me on my spiritual and self-growth path. I'm putting them all on this Amazon list. And if you click on that link to my essential reading list, which will be in the podcast notes or in the YouTube description, wherever you're watching, that's an Amazon affiliate link. So you could click on that, browse the books. Even if you don't buy one of the books, if you buy anything on Amazon, I think in like the 24-hour period after clicking that link, I'll get like a small commission of your purchase. So consider this the episode sponsor. Click that link even if you don't think you're going to buy anything today. Maybe you might end up doing that anyways, and then I'll get a little bit of support, and you can browse my essential reading list while you're at it. So that's one thing. Second thing is, if you didn't know, when I was, this big skate YouTuber that I was like egotistically attached to as my identity, I created a clothing brand called Aero Skate Co. And that still exists, and there's actually some really cool designs up there. And I've actually been thinking about Aero Skate Co. It's like before I was really, really conscious of the fact that I'm on a spiritual path, I was already on a spiritual path. And I created Aero Skate Co. in college when I was starting to break away from the societal mold, as in I wanted to like be a YouTuber and start a clothing brand instead of getting a corporate job, which now I see I was just going into another box, but I was starting to break away from the mold a little bit. And the message behind Aero Skate Co. from the beginning has always been follow your heart. And I always worried that this was so corny, but it meant a lot to me. I was like, I was starting to figure something out, and it was important enough for me that I made it the mantra of my clothing brand. The Heart Arrow logo, I drew it on Snapchat. It came out as a spontaneous creation. To me, it represented this idea that I was like, wait, at the time, I was like, wait, I love skateboarding. Why should I reject that? And now it's like, now in my life, these ideas are fully forming. It's like, yeah, you gotta hold on to the things that bring your inner child joy, and you don't have to accept the mold that you're taught. And obviously I take it a lot deeper now. It's like, but yeah, these ideas were budding in me from before the time I even knew that they were, and I'm starting to like see that my whole life has been bringing me towards awakening. And it's kind of cool to see. Anyways, I guess that was kind of a long-winded Aero Skate Co. plug, but I was like, yeah, you know what? I might as well, and I'm always overthinking the branding. It's like, should I make like a Stoic George merch page? But what the heck? I thought I'd promote the clothing skate brand that still exists. And there's clothing available, and I've shifted it to a made to order model, so there's no wasted inventory. I've been through that. It wasn't fun. So everything is made to order, and it's really, there's some really cool designs. I work with a phenomenal designer Shout out Caroline. And yeah, so, maybe I'll do a Stoic George line on Arrow Skate Co. Maybe I'll eventually make a separate Stoic George merch. At the end of the day, I don't think it fucking matters. But if you want to buy some cool stuff and support me, arrowskate.com. I just feel like there was something I wanted to ask you. Oh, I wanted to ask you all. I guess we're wrapping up this episode. I wanted to ask what you think about a... Can I just show you? Do I have this somewhere? I guess I could put it on the screen. I'm probably going to forget. I have this like let go tattoo. I'll try to remember to put it on the screen. I have this let go tattoo in my cursive handwriting with this flower at the end, and I have started doodling the Stoic George lettering with that flower at the end, and I've also done a let be, and I really like this design, and I'm wondering, like, would you guys buy like a Stoic George branded merchandise? Like if maybe that lettering embroidered over here on a sweatshirt or a hat or something. And then my idea I'm more excited about is like, what if I did a journal? Because I do got to make money, y'all, somehow. Is that weird if my name is on the journal? But like, what about like a nice, like, I'll try to do like a little mock-up and throw it up, like a, how the custom journals are with like the little gold or like, like indented design. Like if it had just a Stoic George, and if it was like, I know what kind of journal I like I could try to make one just with the perfect feeling and the perfect paper. And I really like the dot grids because they give you like the right amount of freedom and structure if you want it. I don't know. What do you think? Should I start a journal business? I don't know. I don't like talking about business. But maybe it's just my karma. Let me check my notes, as always, to make sure I didn't miss anything. Oh, according to TikTok, the moon happened to be in Aries when I had that experience, and I am an Aries sun sign, so that's interesting. Smash that Amazon link. I already said that. Book update kind of did that. Yeah, I think I've kind of hit everything. Thank you all for listening to another episode. Godspeed on your respective journeys. If you want to reach out with questions, ideas, or feedback, you can always leave a comment on YouTube or send me an email. That should be in the description as well. All right. Be well.